Prologue. The night of mourning. The rain began just before dusk. Soft at first, like the hush of ancestors whispering to the living. Then, as night deepened, it poured harder. A relentless curtain of grief that drenched the red earth of Oyeoke Kingdom. It beat against the mourning huts like the steady drums of sorrow. In Chief Kolawol's courtyard, smoke from burning incense coiled into the night air, mingling with the scent of wet earth and bitter herbs. The women's wails rose and fell like waves, their voices quivering with pain. Men chanted praises of the dead, deep and resonant, a reminder of how swiftly power fades when the earth reclaims its own. But Bamijoko, the late chief's younger brother, stood apart beneath the eaves, silent, still, and distant. His white mourning wrapper clung to his body, soaked by the rain that slid down his neck and chest. The soft glow of the firelight caught his face, handsome, sharp, and set in grim restraint. His eyes, dark as the soil after rain, burned with emotions he dared not name. Oyeoke called him Bamijoko the Prosperous, the kingdom's wealthiest coconut trader, a man who had conquered the trade routes from Oyo to Nupe with nothing but wit, will, and the favor of the gods. But all his gold and glory could not ease the hollow ache in his chest tonight. Because as the chants of mourning echoed around him, his gaze found her. Aderonk. She sat near the fire, the black veil of widowhood drawn over her head. The flickering light played against her face, softening her grief into something achingly beautiful. Her hands, trembling and still stained faintly red from her marriage days, rested on her knees. Her wrapper, though plain, could not hide the grace of her body. Even in sorrow, she carried the quiet majesty of a queen. And Bamijoko could not look away. He had loved her in silence long before death made her a widow. From the first day she arrived in Oyeoke, shy, radiant, her laughter like the chime of cowries, he had been undone. But she belonged to his elder brother, Kolawol, the man he respected above all. So he had buried his desire beneath layers of duty and distance. He watched her become his brother's wife. He watched her belly swell and mourned with her when her infant son did not survive the season. He buried the child himself, alone, because Kolawol was away on the king's errands. And every time her eyes found his, filled with silent gratitude and grief, his heart betrayed him a little more. Now Kolawol was gone, and the woman he could never have sat within arm's reach, her tears glittering in the firelight like rain on glass. By custom, Bamijoko had the right to inherit her, to marry his brother's widow and preserve the household name. The elders would soon urge it. The women would whisper. The gods would nod in approval. But he knew the truth. If he took her now, it would not be out of duty. It would be out of hunger, the kind of hunger that burned hotter than sin. Aderonk raised her head slightly, perhaps sensing his gaze. Their eyes met, just for a breath. But in that heartbeat, the courtyard vanished. The rain, the chants, the fire, all melted into silence. There was no accusation in her eyes, no fear. Only a deep, unspoken ache. A shared secret neither dared to speak. Then she looked away, her lashes wet with rain and tears. Thunder cracked above them, echoing like the gods, warning. The drummers began the slow bata rhythm of farewell, the sound of ancestors calling Kolawol's spirit to the other side. The mourners wailed louder, their grief raw and heavy. But Bamijoko could not join them. He could not mourn like the others. Because beneath his sorrow, another feeling had taken root, dark, fierce, and alive. A forbidden fire that refused to die even in the cold rain. He turned away, walking out into the downpour. The rain fell harder, drenching him to the skin, baptizing him in guilt he could never wash off. Behind him, Aderonk sat still, her fingers clutching her wrapper, her body trembling with a storm that mirrored his own. The ancestors might have taken Kolawol that night. But something else had been born in the rain, something neither duty nor tradition could bury. Desire. And desire, once awoken, was a spirit no man could ever cage. Chapter 1. The Coconut Merchant. The rain had ceased by dawn, leaving the earth of Oyeoke glistening like polished bronze. A thin mist drifted over the fields, and the scent of wet leaves hung heavy in the air. The cries of the mourners had quieted, replaced by the chirping of awakening birds and the low thud of pestles as the women began pounding yam for the morning meal. Bamijoko stood by the window of his late brother's compound, staring out at the courtyard. The night's storm had washed away the footprints from the wake, but not the memories. The world seemed clean, yet his soul was heavy. He had slept little. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Aderonke's face, the shimmer of tears on her cheeks, the tremor of her lips, the way her eyes had met his through the rain. He told himself it was pity. He told himself it was duty. But the lie burned hotter with each breath. A soft knock came at the door. "My father," a young voice called. It was Kofowarola, Kolawol's only surviving child, a tall, slender boy of 16. The late chief's first wife, Ayabad, had died when Kofowarola was still learning to walk. Since then, the boy had grown up between the palace and the traders' yards, learning both the ways of the court and the counting of cowries. Bamijoko turned. "Kofowarola," he said gently. "Enter." The boy stepped in, bowing his head with the solemn grace that grief teaches early. His eyes were red from tears, but he held himself with quiet dignity, the shadow of the man he would one day become. "They said I should tell you," he murmured, "that the elders will gather soon to speak about father's burial and the matters that follow." Bamijoko nodded, his chest tightening. Matters that follow. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew what it meant: inheritance, land, and the widow. "Thank you, my son," Bamijoko said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have your father's strength." Kofowarola looked up, blinking fast. "I don't feel strong, Baba. I feel empty." Bamijoko's throat constricted. He pulled the boy closer, holding him against his chest. "You will feel whole again. In time." When Kofowarola finally left, Bamijoko sat on the mat by the window, the boy's words echoing in his mind. Empty. He knew the feeling too well, though his emptiness came not from loss, but from longing. He rose after a while and tied his wrapper more firmly around his waist. He needed air. Outside, the morning light painted the compound gold. Smoke rose from the kitchen hut where the women cooked yam and pepper soup for the elders. Drummers sat idly near the gate, tuning their gangan. The scent of roasted kola drifted faintly from a nearby hearth, reminding him of his trade, his world, the life beyond this heavy silence. Then he saw her. Aderonk moved quietly at the edge of the courtyard, her black veil fluttering like a shadow in the breeze. She carried a small calabash of water toward the shrine set for her since morning it was meant for mourning women to purify themselves. Her steps were measured, graceful, the kind of grace that drew eyes even in sorrow. Bamijoko froze. The sight of her stirred something deep within him, something both sacred and sinful. He wanted to turn away, but the gods seemed cruel this morning, for just as he looked, she glanced up. Their eyes met again. It was only a heartbeat, but the air thickened between them like smoke. Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching. The calabash wobbled in her hand. "Baba Kofowarola," she said softly, using the respectful title. Her voice was steady, yet underneath it, he could hear the tremor, the same one in his chest. "Our wife," he replied, bowing slightly. "You are awake early." "I could not sleep," she murmured, lowering her gaze. "The night was heavy. I can't believe that he is gone." He wanted to ask if she had eaten, if she had wept, if she still felt the cold he saw in her eyes. But such words were dangerous, too tender for daylight. So he nodded, his voice rough. "I understand." She hesitated, as if she too wanted to say more, but the sound of approaching footsteps scattered their silence. One of the elder women appeared, calling her name sharply. Aderonk turned to leave. For a brief moment, her fingers brushed his wrist, accidental, fleeting. But the touch sent a jolt through him. He stood frozen long after she walked away. The whisper of her wrapper faded behind the huts, leaving only the scent of rain and the ghost of her warmth on his skin. From the other side of the courtyard, one of the older traders, Baba Fagbimi, watched him with a knowing eye. The man's lips curved slightly beneath his gray beard. "Enhen, Bamijoko," he said quietly, sidling closer. I see the ancestors have given you more than your brother's wealth to inherit. Bamijoko stiffened. Mind your tongue, Baba Fagbimi. The elder chuckled, not unkindly. I only speak what the spirits whisper. The widow is fair, and tradition is clear. But desire makes a man foolish. He left with a low hum, leaving Bamijoko staring into the space where Aderonk had stood. And for the first time, the thought came unbidden. If love is foolishness, then may the gods forgive me for being a fool. Later in the day, from the widow's hut, Aderonk watched the day unfold through a thin veil of smoke and memory. The world outside felt far away, a world she had lived in once, but no longer belonged to. Her black wrapper clung to her slender frame, the symbol of her grief and her new isolation. Widowhood in Oyeoke was not just a status, it was a shadow. A reminder that life, once shared, had now become hollow. Yet even in that hollowness, she will find a reason to rise each morning, Kofowarola. He was not her son by blood, but the gods knew he had become the child of her heart. She had nursed him through fevers, taught him his prayers, and stayed awake through nights when nightmares made him cry out for his late mother. When she lost her own baby years ago, she had clung to Kofowarola like a lifeline. She remembered that night too vividly, the stillness of her body after hours of pain, the silence where a newborn's cry should have been. She had screamed until her throat bled, begged the gods to give her a child, any child, even if it wasn't of her womb. And the gods had answered. By placing Kofowarola in her care, he had not resented her for taking the place of his mother in his life. The boy was a reflection of Kolawol's first wife, Ayabad, who had died young. Yet his laughter, his curiosity, his calm, they were things she had nurtured, shaped, loved. She smiled faintly now as she saw him crossing the courtyard, tall and proud despite the sadness that still lingered in his steps. He is gradually becoming a man, she thought to herself. But when her eyes shifted, they met Bamijoko's again for the second time that day. He stood near the window of the men's hut, his gaze steady, unreadable, yet piercing through the mist. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. Bamijoko, her late husband's younger brother. The man whose silence always carried weight, whose presence filled a space without words. He had been kind to her from the very beginning, respectful, gentle, distant in the way a man must be with his brother's wife. And yet, there had always been something between them, a current that neither dared to name. When her father, Chief Adipoju of Aladun village, had arranged her marriage to Kolawol, she had not refused. Daughters of titled men did not choose, they obeyed. She had come to Oyeoke as a young bride with lowered eyes and an obedient heart. Kolawol had been good to her, in his way. Their union was peaceful, respectful, predictable, but it was never love. Kolawol treated her kindly, but she had been more ornament than wife, a woman to manage his home, to bear his children, even though she never gave him one, to sit by his side during festivals. He gave her comfort, not passion. And perhaps that was why her soul had always been restless, drawn toward what it could not claim. Chapter 2. The Widow's Silence. It's been several days after the burial of her husband and night had fallen over Oyeoke Kingdom, and with it came a heavy quiet, the kind of silence that carries its own voice. The drums had gone still, the fires burned low, and her widow's quarters was wrapped in darkness, save for the faint glow of palm oil lamps flickering inside each hut. Aderonk lay awake on her mat, eyes fixed on the thatched ceiling, listening to the faint crackle of the lamp beside her. The scent of burning shea oil and old wood filled the room. Sleep would not come. It had not come since Kolawol's death. The others said grief always brings exhaustion, but for her, grief had brought unrest, the kind that made her heart pound harder in the night, the kind that left her staring into shadows that looked too much like memories. Her husband had been a good man. She would never deny him that. Kolawol had treated her with the dignity owed to a chief's daughter, a husband of measured temper and quiet authority. When she came into his household as a young bride, her heart had been full of questions, her eyes lowered in obedience. Her father had said it was a union of strength and alliance, a marriage to bind two powerful families. Love comes after duty, her father had said. And she had believed him. In truth, Kolawole had never been unkind. Their marriage was peaceful, respectful, almost tender at times. But peace is not always warmth. Peace can also be distance. His touch had been courteous and censored, and it came once in so many moons, never hungry but dutiful. His words, polite, but rarely personal. And though she bore his name with pride, she had often felt like an honored guest in her own home. She remembered the night she lost her baby, the sound of her own cries tearing through the silence while Bamijoko sat outside the birthing hut, his face carved in sorrow he could not express. Her husband had been away on an errand for the king. When she awoke to emptiness beside her, her husband had returned after the baby had been buried. He held her for hours, allowing her to mourn their lost child, while holding in his to give her strength. Afterward, she had begged the gods to fill her womb again. Each moon, she had prayed to Yemoja, the mother of waters, offering kola and cowries at the riverbank. But her belly remained flat, her tears unanswered. And then there was Bamijoko. Even as Kolawole's younger brother, he had carried a different kind of energy, quiet, yes, but alive. There was something in the way he moved, in the way his voice filled a room without trying, that made her skin tighten with awareness. She remembered the first time she noticed it, the night he returned from a long trading journey with a gift for her husband, a carved wooden comb from Oyo. She had reached to take it, and his fingers brushed hers, brief, accidental, but her pulse had leapt in her throat. She had pulled back quickly. But that spark had never truly left. It had hidden beneath years of restraint, years of prayer, years of pretending that duty was enough to silence longing. Now, with Kolawole gone, there was no reason for that longing to exist, and yet, it grew louder every day. She sat up slowly, wrapping her black veil around her shoulders. The hut was cool, the night air pressing gently through the cracks in the walls. Somewhere outside, the ogun tree creaked under the wind, and the faint hoot of an owl echoed through the compound. Aderonk placed her palms on her knees and bowed her head. "My God," she whispered, "give me strength. My thoughts shame me." Her heart beat faster, as though the gods themselves were listening. She could not tell anyone, not even the elder women who guided the widows and were always checking on her to see how she is faring, what plagued her heart. The village already whispered too much. She might be confined to the house, but the wall, they say, have ears, and even if they didn't, her maids bring gossip to her. They said she would not spend the stipulated time in mourning. They said Bamijoko's gaze lingered too long on her. They said she might bewitch him into taking her before her mourning period ended. And perhaps, beneath their gossip, there was some truth she was too afraid to face. Because every time she saw him, his tall frame, his quiet eyes, his hands that looked strong enough to crush a coconut and gentle enough to cradle a child, something inside her trembled. She closed her eyes now, pressing her hands to her chest as if to cage her own heart. "Why must I feel this way?" she whispered into the dark. "Why must my soul betray me like this?" The lamp flickered, throwing his image in her mind. Bamijoko standing in the courtyard that morning, rain glistening on his bare shoulders, his wrapper clinging to his lean frame. His eyes had found hers through the mist, steady, intense, almost tender. The memory alone made her breath catch. Her body remembered that moment. Her heart refused to let it fade. She rose quietly and moved to the small altar in the corner of her hut. A clay bowl rested there, filled with water from the stream. Floating on the surface were dried petals and 2 small cowries. It was the place where she prayed each night, not to ask for riches, but for peace. She knelt and whispered, "Mother of waters, wash these thoughts from me. I do not want this desire. I only want peace." But even as she said it, she knew peace was far away. Desire does not leave at the call of prayer, it lingers like perfume, faint but stubborn. And love, when born of silence, often grows in the shadows where reason cannot reach. Outside, the night wind carried the faint rhythm of footsteps, slow, careful, approaching the widow's huts. She froze, heart racing. Her pulse quickened. For a moment, she thought she recognized the weight of that step. Bamijoko. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her veil, torn between fear and hope. But the steps faded past her hut, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Aderong sat there for a long time afterward, trembling in the quiet, unsure whether she was relieved or disappointed. When she finally lay down again, she could not sleep. The rain began once more, furious against the roof, the same rhythm that had filled the night of her husband's burial. And beneath that sound, her heart whispered the truth she dared not speak aloud. She missed Kolawol's steadiness, but she craved Bamijoko's fire and body. Gods help her. Chapter 3. The visit to the widow's hut. The rains had washed Oyeoke clean. By dawn, the courtyards glistened, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and palm bark. In the marketplace, traders shouted blessings to welcome a new day, but in the compound of the late Kolawol, a hush lingered still, the quiet mourning of a household that had not yet healed. Bamijoko sat beneath the Yadara tree, his gaze lost in the horizon where the mist lifted slowly off the hills. His servants had gone to the kolanut storehouse at first light, and the soft clatter of wooden baskets echoed faintly in the distance. He had every reason to focus on business. The traders from Oyo were expected before noon, yet his mind refused to stay with trade. It returned again and again to her. Aderong. The name itself was a prayer he dared not utter aloud. Every day since Kolawol's death, he had found some excuse to pass through her side of the compound, to ensure her roof didn't leak, to check if her kitchen needed more firewood, to bring provisions for her and the boy. Each visit was brief, polite, but each one left him more unsettled. This morning, he told himself it would be the last. He would take a small basket of yam and ground pepper to her hut, as custom required. He would ask if she needed anything more. And then, he would leave. Just one more visit, he muttered, rising to his feet. But his heart knew that, one more, was never the end. When Aderong heard his footsteps approach, her hands stilled over the wooden bowl she was scrubbing. The sound of his sandals on wet earth had become too familiar, she could recognize it even through the walls of her hut. Her pulse fluttered. Bamijoko, she whispered under her breath, as if saying his name might calm the storm inside her. She rose quickly, wiping her hands on her wrapper just as he stepped through the entrance, ducking beneath the low door frame. Good morning, Aderong, he greeted softly, his voice deep, roughened by morning air. Good morning, Bamijoko. Her tone was measured, calm, but her fingers twisted the edge of her veil. He carried a basket of yam, smoked fish, and pepper wrapped in banana leaves. I brought these. The market is full today. I thought you might need to cook before the afternoon rain. Thank you, she said, lowering her eyes. You're too kind. You've already done so much. It's nothing, he replied, setting the basket down near the hearth. Kolawol was my brother. His home and affairs is my duty. The word duty hung between them, heavy and hollow, a shield for feelings neither could name. She nodded, moving to arrange the basket, pretending to busy herself so he would not see her trembling hands. But he noticed anyway. Her scent, soft, faintly of camwood and soap, drifted to him as she bent over the hearth. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He remembered the way she had looked during the burial rites. Her black cloth wrapped around her slender yet curvy frame, her hair shaved clean, her eyes downcast. She had seemed fragile then, a woman wrapped in grief. Now, many months later, her hair had grown into soft short curls again, and though she still wore mourning clothes, there was something alive in her movements, something that stirred his blood. He stepped closer, his voice low. And how is the big boy? He hasn't come to the storehouse in days. He's fine, she said softly. Studying with the priest's apprentice. You know he takes after his father, serious, quiet. Bamijoko smiled faintly. He also takes after his mother. Aderong turned sharply, caught off guard by the warmth in his voice. Their eyes met, a single moment too long. The air thickened. She looked away first, her cheeks burning. You should not say such things, Bamijoko. I am not his mother. But you have always been, he said before he could stop himself. His tone carried something fierce, something that frightened even him, and will continue to be. She froze, her heartbeat quickening. You mustn't, she whispered. It isn't right. I am my brother's widow, he finished quietly. The words were both confession and curse. He stepped back, trying to regain control. Forgive me. I speak foolishly. I came only to be sure you have what you need. But she couldn't bear the distance in his voice, not after hearing what lay beneath it. She turned to face him again, her eyes shining in the dim light. You are kind to me, Bamijoko. Too kind. But it makes my heart restless. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth she was too afraid to name. It was there in the trembling of her hands, in the slight parting of her lips, in the soft, unguarded sadness that made her beauty ache. He moved before he thought, his hand reaching to steady hers as she set down a clay pot. Their skin met, warm against warm, and for a breathless instant, neither of them moved. The silence stretched. The world seemed to hold its breath. Aderonke's lips parted, but no words came. Then, as if waking from a dream, Bamijoko drew his hand back sharply. Forgive me, he murmured, his voice rough. That was wrong. She shook her head slowly, eyes lowered. If it was wrong, then I am guilty too. The words slipped from her like a prayer she'd held too long. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the hills, the promise of rain. Bamijoko turned to leave, his chest heaving. I should go, he said. But his feet did not move. For a long, dangerous moment, they simply stood there, close enough to feel the heat of each other's breath, yet worlds apart. Finally, he stepped toward the door. I will return tomorrow, he said quietly. To see the boy. My new son, he smiled faintly. But they both knew that was only half the truth. When he was gone, Aderonk sank to her knees beside the hearth, her hands pressed to her face. Her heart was no longer her own. And as the rain began to fall again, soft and steady, she whispered into the darkness. May the gods forgive me, for I fear my soul already belongs to him. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Village. The rainy season had begun to fade. The days in Oyeoke Kingdom now smelled of wet dust, ripe palm fruit, and quiet expectation. In the evenings, when smoke from 100 hearths curled into the twilight, the marketplace murmured with a single question that slipped through every conversation, like a restless spirit. Will Bamijoko take over his brother's widow? It was a question as old as the customs of their fathers. Among the Yoruba of Oyeoke, a man's household did not die with him. His name, his land, even his wife, were to be preserved through the brother who remained. The widow inheritance was not a scandal, it was tradition. And yet, in this case, it stirred whispers sharper than rain on tin roofs. Because Bamijoko was no ordinary man. He was young, wealthy, and striking. The women in the market called him the husband of us all. And Aderonk was not like most widows either. She was still radiant, her beauty softened by sorrow but not dimmed. It was only natural, they said, that his gaze might linger. That morning, the elders sent for him. He was summoned to the council hut near the palace square, where the eldest men sat in a circle of carved stools. The air smelled of tobacco and dried coconut, the scent of age and authority. At the center sat Baba Ogunbi, the eldest among them, his skin the color of old wood, his eyes sharp as ever. Bamijoko, he began, you have been doing well by your late brother's household. You pay the servants, you care for the boy, and you keep the coconut trade of our kingdom strong. The ancestors will bless you for this. Bamijoko bowed his head respectfully. It is my duty, Baba. Kolawol was my blood. Yes, Ogunbi said, leaning forward. And that duty is not yet complete. A faint murmur rippled through the council. The younger elder, Chief Aralola, spoke next. The widow's mourning time draws to its end. When the new moon rises, her seclusion will be lifted. It is time, Bamijoko, to make the decision our customs demand. Bamijoko's jaw tightened. Decision. To take her, Aralola said simply. As wife, as protector, as the mother of Kolawol's lineage. It is the way of our fathers. The boy is still young. He needs a man's guidance. The woman needs a husband's protection. And you, he smiled faintly, you need not be alone. The circle of elders hummed in agreement. Bamijoko's throat felt dry. I have thought of it, he said carefully. But Aderonk still mourns. The mourning ends soon, Baba Ogunbi said. And when it does, the gods will expect you to restore balance. If you delay too long, the ancestors will see neglect, not respect. He bowed again, though his heart beat heavily. I hear and obey, Baba. But inside him, there was no peace. That evening, as he walked back through the village, the whispers followed him like shadows. Women bent over cassava leaves paused to murmur when he passed. Children giggled, repeating what they had overheard at home. Uncle Bamijoko will marry Auntie Aderonk, one small voice said. Then she will smile again. He said nothing, only walked faster, his wrapper brushing against his legs. By the time he reached his brother's compound as opposed to going to his own, his chest felt heavy, not from shame, but from the weight of desire that tradition now dared him to fulfill. Aderonk was at the back of the compound, spreading her washed cloths on the line. Her black mourning veil still covered her head, but the cloth beneath was no longer deep black, it had faded into soft gray, like the slow fading of grief itself. She turned when she heard him. Bamijoko, she greeted softly. Her voice always did something to him, it steadied and unsteadied him all at once. He stood there for a moment, watching her hands move gracefully as she pinned the cloth. The late sun bathed her in gold. The elders called me today, he said. She froze. Why? They spoke of you. Aderonki's hands stilled. Of me? He nodded slowly. They say your mourning is almost done. They said it is time I take over my brother's household, completely. Her heart stumbled. You mean? Yes, he said, his gaze holding hers. They mean you. Silence fell, thick and trembling. She turned away, her fingers tightening around the clothespin. And what did you tell them? He hesitated. That I would think of it. Her lips parted slightly. Think of it, she repeated. As if it were only a matter of duty. He stepped closer. What else can I say, Aderonk? If I speak the truth of my heart, they will call it sin. If I deny it, they will call it disobedience. Her breath caught. And what is the truth of your heart? He did not answer with words, his eyes said it all. She looked away quickly, her chest rising and falling. Bamijoko, you must not. I must not what? He said softly, stepping closer until the scent of her skin filled his breath. Must not want you. Must not dream of what is already half mine by custom and wholly mine by desire. Her eyes lifted to his, dark, wet, trembling. You speak like a man who will ruin me. He smiled faintly, but the ache in his voice betrayed him. Perhaps you ruined me the day you stepped foot into this household. The space between them shrank until only the wind moved. The faint rustle of drying cloth was the only sound. Aderonki's fingers brushed his wrist. By accident, by fate, she didn't know, and the world tilted. For a heartbeat, the future seemed written. Her as his, him as hers, the boy safe, the house whole again. But then, she drew her hand back sharply. No, she whispered. Not yet. Let me finish my mourning. Let me face the village as a widow first, not with a scandal. He exhaled slowly, pain shadowing his eyes. Then I will wait, after all I've waited years. She nodded, tears glimmering in her lashes. Then wait. He turned to leave, and as he did, she whispered softly, Bamijoko. He looked back. Do not let them force you to love me only because they said you must, she said. If you must take me, let it be because your heart has no other choice. Bamijoko stood still for a long moment. Then he said, quietly but with finality. My heart decided long before they ever spoke. That night, Aderonk dreamt of rain, heavy, endless rain washing through her hut as strong arms held her close. She woke with her breath shallow, her palms trembling, the taste of his name still on her lips. And outside, in the courtyard, Bamijoko sat awake under the moonlight, staring at her window, wondering how long duty and desire could live in the same heart before one consumed the other. Chapter 5. The New Moon's Fire. The moon rose like a polished calabash, full and glowing above Oyeoke Kingdom, heralding the start of the farming season. Drums rolled through the air, deep, rhythmic, alive, and the villagers poured into the square dressed in bright wrappers, cowries glinting in the firelight. Children danced barefoot in the dust, men beat talking drums, and women sang songs to Oko, the god of harvest, and Osun, the giver of fertility. It was the night of renewal, the first full moon since the end of the rains, and, for Aderonk, the night her mourning veil would finally be lifted. For 12 months she had walked in silence and shadow. Tonight, she would step into the light again. Aderonk stood before her hut as the elder women approached with a clay bowl filled with water and fresh leaves. The women sang softly as they poured water over Aderonki's hands, then her head, then her feet, a ritual of cleansing and rebirth. When it was done, they wrapped her in a fresh cloth the color of dawn, pale gold, soft and radiant. The crowd cheered as she stepped into the square, her veil gone, her face uncovered for the first time since Kolawol's burial. From the edge of the gathering, Bamijoko watched. He had seen beauty before, in traders' daughters, in passing maidens, but none like this. Aderonki's presence silenced the noise of the drums inside him. The golden cloth hugged her like the first light of morning, and when she smiled, even faintly, it felt like the moon itself leaned closer. The village chanted blessings, elders raised their staffs to the sky, and palm wine flowed like laughter. Bamijoko did not join the dancing. He stood still, caught in the firelight, watching her move among the people, graceful, shy, alive. And then, when the torches burned low and the songs began to fade, their eyes met across the courtyard. Later that night, when the drums had quieted and the moon hung high, Aderonk stepped out into the courtyard. The festival still hummed faintly in the distance, but here, near the old Yadara tree, the world was softer, the air scented with night jasmine. She didn't hear his approach, only the sudden stillness that told her she was no longer alone. Bamijoko, she whispered. He stopped beside her, his voice low. You look free. It feels strange, she said. Like waking from a dream I was not ready to end. He looked at her, the light from the moon tracing her cheek. You were always meant for the light. They stood in silence, close enough to feel the warmth between them. The world around them seemed to pause, even the crickets held their song. Everyone will be expecting your choice soon, she said, her voice trembling. The elders, the people. They think you will come to claim what tradition says is yours. And what do you think? He asked. I think, she hesitated, her heart pounding. I think I would not fight it, if it came from your heart, and not the world's command. He stepped closer, his hand rising halfway, then stopping midair, caught between longing and restraint. You know what my heart wants. Her eyes met his, luminous in the moonlight. Say it. He shook his head faintly, voice rough. If I say it, I won't be able to stop. Then don't stop, she whispered. The night seemed to draw a breath. His hand found hers, fingers trembling, then firm, and for a moment, nothing existed but the warmth of skin and the sound of their breathing. He leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching, his voice barely a whisper. I have waited through your mourning, through my own guilt, through the noise of duty and the silence of nights. If this is wrong, let the gods judge me, but I can't unlove you now. Her eyes closed, her lips trembling in a half smile, half tear. Then let the gods look away, she murmured. Their lips brushed, not a kiss of conquest, but of surrender, brief, trembling, burning with all the words they had never dared to speak. When they parted, her head rested against his chest. Neither spoke for a long time. The moon glowed brighter, the drums in the distance soft and slow, the rhythm of beginnings. When Bamijoko left that night, two hearts ache. Chapter 6, The Right of the Living and the Dead. Dawn came slowly to Oyeoke, spilling gold across the red earth like a libation poured to the gods. Roosters cried, drums murmured low, and a line of elders, wrapped in white, made their way to the late Kolawol's compound. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and palm wine. The day had come for the final rite, the joining of the widow to her husband's brother. It was said that on such mornings, the spirits of the dead watched from the wind. Aderonk sat quietly inside her hut, veiled in deep blue, the color of transition. Around her, women hummed old songs of mourning and renewal. She kept her eyes lowered, her fingers trembling against her lap. Though her mourning had ended, her heart still ached, not for Kolawole, whom she had respected deeply, but for the love she had never known with him. Now that love burned for the man who would soon be called her husband. Bamijoko. Outside, the voices of the elders rose. The oldest, Baba Atoyebi, called for her to step out. Aderonk, wife of Chief Kolawole, come forth. The time has come to pass your husband's name from the world of the dead to the living. She rose slowly. Each step she took across the courtyard felt like walking between two worlds. The morning sun kissed her cheeks, and she could feel Bamijoko's gaze waiting, firm, reverent, full of things forbidden and divine. He stood beside the family shrine, dressed in white, a string of cowries around his neck. His head was bowed, yet his body thrummed with a tension she could feel even from a distance. The elders began to chant. Palm wine was poured on the earth for Kolawole's spirit, and the air filled with the rhythmic beat of a small talking drum. As water flows to water, intoned Baba Atoyebi, so shall the blood of brothers flow into one. As the yam grows from the same root, so shall this household stand again. An elder woman took Aderonki's hand and led her to Bamijoko's side. She felt his warmth beside her, a heat that reached her through the layers of cloth and tradition. They knelt together as a goat was led forward, its bleat sharp in the morning air. When its blood touched the ground, the elders' voices rose louder. Kolawole, son of Adabanjo, receive peace. Your brother takes your place. Your wife remains under your house. Your son shall not hunger nor wander. Aderonki's heart pounded. As the ritual ended, a white cloth was placed over her shoulders, and Baba Atoyebi spoke the final words. From this sunrise, Aderonk is no longer widow but wife again. Bamijoko, guard her as you guard your trade. Her laughter, her tears, her child, they are now your burden and your joy. A murmur rippled through the crowd, women nodding, men whispering. The rite was complete. The gods, the ancestors, and the living had spoken. That evening, when the crowd dispersed and the compound grew quiet again, Aderonk stood by the threshold of her hut, staring at the last embers of the ritual fire. Her new husband approached slowly, his steps measured, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace of the moment. It is done, he said softly. Before the eyes of the gods, you are mine now, and I am yours. She turned to him, her voice trembling. You say it as if it were a blessing, or a curse. Perhaps both, he murmured. But it is truth. The silence that followed was charged. Not the silence of strangers, but of two souls finally standing where fate had always led them. When his hand brushed her arm, she did not draw away. Her heart fluttered, torn between reverence and yearning. The torchlight flickered against his face, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. I feared this moment, she whispered. Because I know my heart no longer belongs to duty alone. He looked at her then, deeply, fully, the way a man looks at something he has wanted far too long. Then let us give it to the gods, he said, voice rough. Let them decide what to do with it. The drums from distant compounds rose again, faint but steady, as if the earth itself kept rhythm with their unspoken desire. And not far away, Kofowarola watched from the veranda, the night wind lifting his hair. He had seen the way his uncle's hand lingered on his stepmother's arm, the way her voice softened when she spoke to him. He did not yet understand love, but he knew when the world around him was changing. The fire that burned in their hearts had been sanctified by tradition, but whether it would bring peace or ruin, only the gods could tell. Chapter 7. The Night of Belonging. The moon had climbed high, washing Oyeoke in its quiet silver. The drums from the distant compounds had faded, and only the hum of night insects filled the air. The compound of the late Kolawole lay still, except for the soft glow spilling from the hut that now belonged to Bamijoko and Aderonk. Inside, the air was thick with the faint scent of palm oil, burnt incense, and the lingering traces of the day's rituals. The white cloth laid earlier over Aderonki's shoulders hung now on the wall, trembling slightly in the night breeze. She sat by the lamp, her face calm but her heart restless. She was wife again, a truth she had thought would bring her peace, yet all it brought was a deep, consuming awareness of the man who now shared her house. The door curtain rustled, and Bamijoko stepped in. He had shed the ceremonial beads and cloth, now wearing only a plain wrapper around his waist. For a moment, he simply watched her, the soft curve of her neck, the quiet grace of her hands folded in her lap. Aderonk rose, lowering her eyes in respect. You should rest, she said quietly. Today must have been long for you. Long. He gave a small smile. It has been many years in the making. She looked up, startled by the tenderness in his voice. He came closer, his steps unhurried. Do you know, Aderonk, I could have refused the right. Her breath caught. Refused. Why would you say that? It was custom. Custom bends when the heart is unwilling, he said softly. The elders do not force a man to take what he does not want. He paused, eyes dark and steady. But I wanted you. Aderonk turned away, her throat tight. Do not speak so, Bamijoko. The spirits may hear. You make it sound like desire, not duty. It was never duty, he said. Not for me. She faced him then, tears bright in her eyes. You should not have waited for me. You could have taken a wife long ago, built your own home, had sons of your own. I could have, he said. But I did not, because no woman ever felt right beside me. I tried to forget you, Aderonk, but I carried you in every trade route, every market, every empty night. She stared at him, her chest rising and falling. You speak of forbidden things. Then let it be forbidden, he said. The gods themselves have bound us now. Whatever sin it was before has become sanctified by their will. Silence settled, heavy, trembling. Outside, the night wind stirred the palm fronds, whispering like the breath of ancestors. Inside, Aderonki's fear slowly gave way to something older, deeper, the peace of being wanted not by duty, but by choice. She took a slow step toward him. All these years, she said softly, I thought you looked at me because I reminded you of your brother. Bamijoko shook his head, his voice low. No, Aderonk, I looked at you because I could not stop. Her heart beat so loud she could hear nothing else. The world outside faded. The mourning, the gossip, the heavy eyes of tradition, until there was only this quiet hut, this moment, this long-denied truth between them. When he reached for her hand, she did not pull away. And when he drew her closer, the world seemed to still. No words were left, only the soft hum of the lamp, the whisper of the wind through the doorway, and the slow surrender of two souls who had waited too long. The night deepened around them, wrapping them in the tender hush of belonging. When the lamp finally dimmed, the house was filled not with grief, but with the quiet rhythm of new beginnings, because finally Aderonk knows what it feels like to be with a man her heart yearns for. Epilogue. When the rain returned. The rains came early that year. Thick, silver drops fell upon Oyeoke's red earth, washing away the dust of long grief and planting the scent of new life. Fields that had lain cracked and weary began to green again, and the people said the gods had smiled upon their land. In the courtyard of Kolawol's old compound, laughter returned. Palm leaves shimmered wet under the rain, and smoke rose from the kitchen hut where Aderonk stirred yam porridge. Her wrapper was tied high about her waist, her hair plaited and shining with oil. From outside, Bamijoko's voice carried, deep, calm, steady, as he spoke with traders about the new season's coconut harvest. It had been moons since the joining, but still she sometimes paused to marvel at how life could shift so quietly, from widowhood to companionship, from silence to song. She had feared shame. She had feared the whispering tongues of the market women and the stares of those who pitied her. But time had softened the gossip, and the steadiness of Bamijoko's care silenced the rest. He had become not only her husband, but her protector, not by force of tradition, but by the gentle weight of devotion. Kofowarola was taller now, his boyish face grown sharper with youth. He helped his uncle inspect the coconut sacks, his laughter light and easy. He no longer flinched at the sight of his stepmother's closeness to Bamijoko. Instead, he had come to understand that peace was its own kind of blessing. One evening, as rain clouds gathered over the hills, Aderonk sat with him beneath the veranda. The smell of wet earth filled the air. You look more like your father every day, she said softly. Kofowarola smiled, his eyes bright. And uncle says I trade like him too. She nodded. Your father would be proud of you. Both of you. He turned to her. You are happy now, aren't you? Aderonk paused, then smiled faintly. Happiness does not always come where we expect it. Sometimes it hides in the ashes of duty, waiting for us to find it. The boy nodded, thoughtful, and returned to his task. When Bamijoko joined them later, wiping the rain from his shoulders, he leaned close to her. The traders from Alara will come tomorrow, he said. They asked for you to prepare your pepper soup. They say nothing sweetens the tongue like Aderonki's cooking. She laughed, a sound soft and alive, echoing against the rain. He looked at her then, the way he always had, with the quiet reverence of a man who had found his home not in walls, but in a heart. That night, as the rain drummed softly upon the roof, Aderonk lay beside him, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the calm rise and fall of his breathing. For the first time since Kolawol's death, she felt no guilt, no fear, only peace. Outside, the rain washed through the earth, feeding the roots of yam and cassava, carrying away the last traces of old sorrow. Inside, warmth bloomed, the kind that came not from fire, but from two souls who had finally found the courage to love beyond custom. In Oyeoke, the elders would later say that when the rains returned that year, they carried blessings. For the land, for the people, and for the house of Bamijoko, son of Adabanjo, whose love had turned mourning into renewal. And beneath the soft murmur of rain, Aderonk whispered into the dark. What we once thought was forbidden has become our peace.